We're live. I think.
Anybody waiting?
Looks like there's 6 viewers waiting, so we should have someone watching us right now. Can someone please say hello so we know you can hear and see us? Oh, we have a hello.
Good. Are you ready to start?
Yeah, it's 1 o'clock.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to week 1 of our Mystery Sew Along 2025. If you've never joined us before, well, hi. I'm glad that you finally decided to join us, but we'll just go over a couple things. You have to remember that this whole thing is live and unscripted. So if something's going to happen, it's just going to happen. So we're going to have to maybe muddle through certain things. If I do make an error sewing, you'll have to see, you'll see how I can fix it. And like I said, what happens, happens. So while we're waiting for more people to join, don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. YouTube likes that.
And you can share it with your friends.
Yeah, please share it with your friends. It's a great thing to do. I know I have some people that are doing it here with their sister that's out west. So it's a kind of neat way to be able to sew along with your friends or your sisters or family and not be in the same place. Weather's bad, doesn't matter. We don't have to go out. So win-win situation. So because this is the first week, and I know that I have some brand new quilters that are joining us this year, I'm just going to quickly go over a couple things. So normally what we do is you do your cutting ahead of time, but I thought I would just touch on that right now a little bit. And I'm going to cut my strips. So you did check out the video, though. We did have a link in there to the video to preparing your fabric. So if you had batik fabrics, maybe you should wash them and then starch them, or if they're regular fabrics, starch and press. Everything's folded, ready, wonderful to go. Also, let me see, what else do I have for? Don't forget to ask a question. Tiffany is monitoring the computer, so if somebody asks us a question, answer it right away, because you're not the only one that's asking. Somebody else out there wants to know the same thing. So there's never a dumb question. Anything else to go, or should I just get started?
I think that's everything.
Okay,
We've got few people saying hello and good afternoon. So we've got some viewers.
Awesome, perfect. Okay, so let's get going. So did you go to the Facebook page? Did you print your instructions? You would have had instructions like that. So with all cutting that you need to do for the fabrics today. So I went to my list and I went to pick whichever fabrics that I needed to cut. So I went into my box that I have them all safe, and I pulled out the ones that I needed for today, and then I start cutting. So we're going to start with fabric D. So I have it all nicely pressed, ready to go. I'm going to fold it in half. Right sides together. That being said, I'm using a batik. So there is no real right or wrong side with the batiks.
Why right sides together?
I'm sorry, wrong side, right sides out. Okay. Wrong sides together. I like to see the pretty fabric. That's why. But there is no right and wrong side for batiks. So whichever one you think that you want to use, and then if you can't tell the difference, it doesn't matter.
That looks crooked.
So what I'm doing is I am lining up the top. I'm lining up my salvages because that's the only straight part that I know that's straight right now. My seams that are cut off the bolt, they're not necessarily straight because they're just off of the bolt. So it's not hanging straight on the bottom. So I'm going to adjust my layers right and left until it hangs perfectly straight. So I had to move the layer close to me to the left, and now it's hanging nice and straight. So now I can lay it on my mat. If I had to, I could fold it one more time and use a smaller ruler to cut my strips. However, that being said, there's more chance of things shifting and moving around, cutting boomerangs. So if you can and you have the regular long 24-inch ruler, I recommend just folding it the one time. So the first cut that we want to do is to trim up our edge. You can see that I am not lined up anymore on my edges, but I have this beautiful fold, and that's what we're going to use as our starting off point to keep everything straight. Now, I've got things piled on the end of my mat, so I'm going to have to move my fabric, but normally what I do is I just move my mat. So I'm going to go over here onto the fold, and I am going to line up a line of my ruler so it's perfectly on my fold, and that I can see that I'm cutting both layers of the fabric. Because I'm right-handed, I have to do it this way first. It's nice that I have it on the edge of a table so I can walk onto the other sides. Now to cut. So I'm going to put my hand on the ruler, and I like to put my little finger off the ruler for two reasons. It helps it support it from sliding, keeps my thumb away from the edge. I'm going to hold my rotary cutter. I want to make sure that it's nice and straight up and down. I don't want to be cutting at an angle on either way. So there's a bumpy part on the top for your finger. Put it there. Don't just grab it this way. You're going to have that downward pressure. You can cut very, very well. If you have to saw with your rotary cutter, change your blade. It's really sharp. So
it should be really sharp.
It should be really sharp, yeah. Sometimes we don't change them often enough. So I never want to cut past my fingers, so I'm going to butt it up against the ruler, hold it straight up and down. I'm going to cut up to the edge of my fingers. I am going to walk my fingers up, and I can feel if my ruler is shifting because I will stop right away. So now I have that perfectly wonderful edge that's ready to go. Normally, like I said, I would turn my mat around. Let's just hope it doesn't shift anything. It's a small piece of fabric. That makes a big difference. If we were using a really large piece, I would just accordion fold it all onto the edge of the mat. I would be using my mat in this direction. Actually, I could probably do that. Probably easier for you to see, isn't it, Tiff?
Not necessarily.
Okay. So now I looked at my pattern, and it says I need to cut one. I'm just doing a lap size quilt.
Your arms are going to be in the way this way.
My arms are going to be in the way this way?
The way you were originally going to do it.
Okay. So according to my pattern, lap size, I only need to cut one strip at 3 inches. So I'm going to find my 3-inch mark. Little tip, if you have the Creative Grid rulers, if it's the numbers upside down, don't look at those ones. So in this way, I have the halves, the 3 1/2, 1 1/2. I want to use the white ones because I want to cut a 3-inch. So I'm going to align not only the line on the edge of the fold, but also the line on the fabric. I want to make sure that my ruler line is exactly on top of the fabric. So not beside it, but just on top. So now I'm going to cut my strip. Cut. I checked again to make sure it didn't shift. It's still on the edge of my fabric, and I'm good to go. Now I need to cut 3-inch squares. So I'm going to turn my strip sideways, and I'm going to just line it along the edge of a line on the mat just to hold it in straight. Because I have the luxury of having a smaller ruler, I'm going to use that. Just the smaller the rulers, the easier they are to hold. I'm going to take any line on my ruler, and I'm going to line it with the edge of the strip. I could even use a square, which is kind of neat because it will have the 3 by 3 line. So I'm going to put any line on my ruler on the edge of my fabric, and I want to cut off my selvage. Never leave the selvage in a quilt. it shrinks differently than regular fabric, so it will distort your seams and stuff if you leave it in the quilt. So because it's a little one, I'm just going to cut backwards. I can cut that off like that. So now I'm going to take my 3-inch lines. I can align them on the edge of my fabric, and I can cut my squares. I will continue on until I cut the 12 or the 20 or the 36 that you need. Here's a little tip. So if you're a beginner quilter, and a lot of times I do it this way, one strip at a time, but if you want to power cut, here's a tip. Take your strip, line it up with a line on the mat, and we're going to take the rest of the strips that we have to cut, and I am going to stagger them down one line as I go. So this goes on the next inch line. My next one can go on the next inch line. My next one, oops, this one came unfolded. On the next inch line. There we go. So why I'm doing this is I can see that everything stays straight, that that bottom strip isn't just totally hidden and that it's wonky in some way. Also, it's going to reduce the bulk, so I am not cutting 2, 4, 6, 8 layers at a time. I am cutting maybe 4, maybe 6, but it's reducing the amount of block. And I can continue on as long as my ruler. All right, so I'm gonna have to, does this one, yeah, this one still works. Just the smaller the ruler, the easier they are to work. So when I've got it like this, I am just going to, because I had moved them around, again, put a line of the ruler on the bottom of this bottom strip. I can also check here and see that they're all lining up on a strip on my ruler, and I'm just gonna trim off this edge. Just clean that all up. So now I can cut 3. And I will get, let's talk about design boards for a second. These design boards, if you go onto YouTube and it's Lori Holt design boards, I absolutely love them. They are just made with the paper, the Coroplast from the dollar store, some batting and some binding strips.
If we remember, we can probably link that on our Facebook group for you.
It holds, because it's batting, my things don't shift around as much, which is really, really cool. So I'm going to continue on cutting until I have 12. So I've got 4 there now. Eight. And another quick one, because I know 3 and 3 is 6.
That can be a dangerous game sometimes.
It could be dangerous.
You can lose a sliver of your...
way. We won't do it that way. 3. And one more, I believe. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I think. Count those. You can be my sous chef. Was that 12?
That's 10.
10? Okay, one more. So I have all my blocks cut. I have them labeled, whether you have fancy felt label alphabets or whether you have masking tape or some kind of marking. Mark them in the fabric that it is, because that's the way our patterns will run, that you need those specific pieces. I'm going to take these. I'm not going to throw them out. I'm going to put them in my box. Next week when I need little pieces, they'll be there that I can cut little pieces first, or if I mess up a block here, I have some spares. So let's just take a second, and we are going to just move the camera here. Bear with us. and we'll get into a few things for our sewing.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, we're going to start on some of the basic tools that everybody should have in their toolbox. First and foremost, of course, we have thread and needles. Let's just start right here. First and foremost, we need a sewing machine. I'm going to put a little ad in here right now. I'm sewing with the Quilt Expression 720. It is an absolutely fantastic machine. It's all the machine that you're going to need for piecing. It has a really large throat, great for even when you do your quilting. Why I want to show you this machine today is a couple of years ago, FOF had their 160th anniversary. So they came
last year.
Was it last year or 2 years ago? Whatever. Anyways, they came out with a 720 special edition. Same machine. So now they have decided that they don't need two machines that are the same. So they have taken and they're discontinuing this Quilt Expression 720. They will have the 720 special edition still in the lineup. So the thing is, this machine, MSRP is $5,599. It is on sale while supplies last of $3,399.
While supplies last.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you are in the market for a new machine, and you're in the area here, come on in and take a look at this beautiful machine. I can't believe the price. If I didn't have this one, I think I would jump at it for myself. So anyways, so that's where we're going with this machine. And as we're sewing along, you'll see some of the features probably that it has on the as we go. So okay, so now I've put a new needle in my machine.
What kind of needle did you put in your machine?
Of course I have Fofman needles.
Okay, what size and type of needle though?
Okay, so it goes in conjunction with your thread. If you are using a 40 weight thread, I recommend an 80 needle. However, I absolutely love Orifil thread, and it's a 50 weight, so it's a nice fine thread. When you are pressing your seams, they go together so nicely. You don't have any thread buildup, which I didn't know was a thing before when I started sewing. So when I'm using the thin thread, I love to have a 70, so it's a very thin needle, goes through points really great, doesn't distort seams. Love those. Normally, the colors that we would use are one of those three, either beige or gray, or if I'm sewing batiks, I use this number 2370. It seems to blend with all the batiks. That being said, this time I am using batiks, and normally I would use that. I'm just using the beige today so you can see the seams a little bit better. And you will notice that when you're pressing, you're not supposed to see your seams anyways. That's why we only have to use, these threads. You don't have to match with every color that you're doing. Alrighty. We're going to need some kind of marking device. I use white chalk on dark fabric. I can use the blue wash away if it's light fabric. If I'm marking on the back of fabric, I'll use a friction marker. Don't use it on the front. It's not guaranteed that it's going to come out.
We have a hello from Witless Bay, Newfoundland.
Hi!
I love hearing where people are from.
Also, if you want to just use a mechanical pencil to work, draw your lines for sewing, that works equally well, so long as it's something that you can see. We are going to need some pins. I have the Clover silk pins. They're really thin. Those big-headed yellow pins are great, or the flower pins are great for certain things, but I find they do distort seams. That I do like the silk pins, or there's a bowhin. I think these orange one and the blue one are the bowhin pins. Very sharp, very fine, and don't distort your seams. Then we're going to need, of course, a pair of scissors, an iron, cutting mat.
Can you talk about why you have two different rotary cutters here?
Why do I have two different rotary cutters?
What's the benefit of the two?
Okay, sure. So the bigger the rotary cutter, the harder it is to go around curves. I like using this one. It also goes through more layers of fabric. So because I was power sewing those pieces through, all those strips, I wanted to use this one. I'm going to get a better blade. These ones, better cut. These ones are really great for curves, or also when I'm trimming my blocks, I do like a little cutter. I just seem to have a little bit more control. Again, personal preference, but just make sure it has a good, fresh, sharp blade. This blade, of course, because it's smaller, will wear out faster than this one. So this is our standard everyday go-to kind of cutter.
45 millimeter.
It's the 45 millimeter, and this is a 28 millimeter. Any questions? Nope. Okay. We do have a few different squares here that we will go over as we are sewing. So let's go to the sewing machine.
Oh, sorry. That's me.
That's you. Yeah. Okay. So I have on my 1/4 inch foot. Again, quilting is mathematical, and it all has to do with what comes onto the how the top of your fabric works out. I don't really care what a seam allowance is. That's why I always hate saying that you have to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. I do have a video, I believe, in perfecting your 1/4 inch seam, and if you haven't watched it,
we shared it on the group last week.
It's a really good thing to do. And if you don't have a 1/4 inch foot, and again, because we are a quilt store, every single one of our machines that you bought, if you buy a machine here, will come with the FOF 1/4 inch foot, which is a really great foot. It doesn't have a flange. I find I don't get as much distortion. You can use this
diagonal seam tape.
Thank you, diagonal seam tape. I'm just going to pop my foot off. If I want to put that onto my machine, all I'm going to do is I'm going to roll down my needle a little bit. I am going to stick the needle into the red line. That's my center line. And I am going to align it up like this, straight. I can also use a ruler, lining some of my ruler lines up with the edge of the lines that are on my foot, making sure that it's nice and straight. I can cut that off, and then I would use an X-Acto knife that I don't have here. I think I can do it with my fingertip. There, I got it. Thank you. And I'm going to cut it there. So now it's on my tape, so I can actually use that as well for what we're going to be doing today.
We do want to make sure that we remove that tape from any place that is going to hit our feed dogs. We don't want to get the feed dogs stuck in the tape.
Okay. Alrighty, so this week what we're going to do is make some half square triangles. Now my favorite way of piecing is to actually make things a little bit oversized so we don't have to struggle so much, and then we are going to square them up so we're perfection. Can you get me a magic wand, please? I think it should be in that drawer. So let's just get rid of some of these things here right now. I think I'm going to use the white chalk today because of my fabrics were kind of dark. So we're going to start with our, which ones would show up better on screen? The green ones? Okay.
Doesn't matter.
So we are going to start, and one of the fabrics.
You're starting with D and E?
So I'm starting with D and E. What I want to do, there's two different things that you can do. You can draw a line from corner to corner, and we're going to sew on either side of the line. Or if you're a new sewer and a little worried about your seam, you could take this. This is a Quilter's Magic Wand. We sell them here in the store. there is a, can they see that? That there is a groove down the center. I'm going to line that up with the corners of my block, and I'm going to draw on both sides of my magic wand, and that will be my sewing lines. Okay. So what I want to do, and I drew those on the back. So I am going to sandwich right sides together, the D and the E squares, and I will sew them together. I love chain piecing. So what I am going to do is I'm going to take a little piece of fabric and I'm going to start my sewing. You can see that as I start my sewing, my foot comes down automatically on this machine. And because it's a FOF machine, I have this IDT back here. I don't know if Tiffany, can you zoom in on that? Every FOF machine has that. And it's like a built-in walking foot. It's going to pull my top fabric along with my bottom fabric. So I am going to stop just past the edge of my leader, and I am going to put my machine in the needle down position.
Now, real quick before you go any further, what stitch length should you have, Cindy?
Good call, Tiffany. We love to quilt with a 2.0 stitch length. Most sewing machines always start with a 2.5, which is more for cloth making. We like a 2.0, and there is a reason why we do that. We don't want to back stitch at the beginnings and endings of our rows because we don't want that thread buildup, especially if we're putting in a lot of triangles into points. So the smaller the stitch length, the less chance that our seams are going to open up. Sometimes, depending if I'm really particular in very tiny pieces, I will even sew with a 1.8. So I am going to take my first unit and the one that I drew the line, the double line. I am going to lift my foot, butt it up right against there, and I am going to sew on the line. So I chain piece a lot. Why I like to chain piece? Tiffany says I'm not supposed to talk when I'm sewing because you can't hear me. So,
this isn't that.
No, this works too.
This is a live.
Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. So what ends up happening is, what was I saying? Oh, chain piecing. Have you ever started sewing and you get that rat's nest underneath? You all have to remember to hold your threads. I don't care what sewing machine you have, that happens. When I'm sewing with either a leader or chain piecing, my fabric is holding my ends for me. So it works really, really wonderfully that way. So I've sewn the one. I can go and grab the next one, or what I like to do is sewing one unit at a time. Just going to clip off my leader, and I will flip it around and sew back down the other side. You can see on my tape here, I know that I'm straight because my line is lining up with that center line of my tape. But I am looking at my needle to make sure that I'm sewing on that line. I'm going to stop there, lift my foot. This machine lifts the foot automatically, so that's really cool. Oops, I dropped my block. Okay, so the next piece, right sides together. If you draw one line, I am going to sew a 1/4 inch away from the line. I'll find it. So 1/4 inch away from the line, the edge of my 1/4 inch foot is lining this up.
All I see is your knuckles.
Okay, and the line that we drew from point to point is on this 1/4 inch line on our diagonal seam tape. So I'm going to sew. Thank you, Tiff. She also gave me my purple thing, which I love to hold the corners, and I'll show you in a minute. I can clip this off. Then we would sew back down this other side. What I love for this is once we're getting really close to the edge, your fabric wants to slide, I can hold my purple thing and I can hold this right up to the very last second and get a really nice seam. So now if you're brave, I'm just going to sew a couple more blocks here. we have these lines here. So I like to say I'm a time challenged quilter, so I love all the tips and stuff that makes my sewing go smooth. Maybe sometimes I'm just a little lazy. So this way I don't have to draw lines that I have this tape. Do you remember when we were sewing this line that the corner lined up on that?
Your mic is over there.
That's all that I have to do. So I'm going to start sewing here with the edge of my foot on that corner, and I'm going to line this corner of my block. Just going to line that up with this black line. I'm going to take 2 stitches, so it started now. I'm not going to look at my needle. I'm just going to look at my corner right here, and I'm going to let that follow up my black line. I can always grab another square, and I can sew another one going in this direction. Line that up a little bit better. We could always pin these as well. Where's my pins? If your fabric wants to shift, you can always pin them nice and straight. You could sit and have them all pinned, ready to go. So I'm lining up this corner, following through. I am just going to clip these off here at the back. So now that I can go to my next, the piece that I sewed the one, I'm going to flip it around. Again, lining up my edge, my corner with the edge of my foot, this corner with my black line down here. I don't know if you can see this right here, but my square shifted a little bit. You know, I'm okay with that because these are oversized and we're going to square them up. Again, just following that black line with that corner, and we're good to go. So now we have all our squares sewn. Now we're going to cut them in half. If you've drawn with the magic wand, don't grab the magic wand to cut it. It's way too small.
You don't want to sew your other colors together?
Do we want to sew a couple of the other colors together first? Okay, sure. So we can have a couple of them ready to go.
And that is your F and G colors?
So that's my F and G.
So Cindy hasn't shown you the diagrams. You didn't get these diagrams because, you know, it's a mystery, so we figured we'd make you wait. We will post this after the live stream, so these are the color pairings that you're making. We will post this after the live stream.
Okay, so I've drawn some lines. Let's just sew a couple of these. I'm going to throw my leader back in there. Sew to the edge, needle down, foot's up. Lining my 1/4 inch foot along that drawn line. 1, 2. I have only one line on this one, so I am just going to grab this one. Sometimes when I'm having a really bad day, I just find this kind of sewing very relaxing. And I can go into my sewing room. I can put a book on tape or some music on, my headphones so I can block out the world, and I can just sit and sew. Sometimes I call it mindless sewing, but it is very satisfying and very relaxing. Okay, I could have also just put that leader back in there and it would have been ready to sew the next one. Okay, so I have my blocks here.
Scooch over.
I am just going to stand up. I cannot, oh, sorry.
Okay, move the chair.
Moving the chair out of the way. Okay, so I cannot cut sitting down. It throws an angle at my ruler, so I can't really see exactly where the lines are, the top are, so I like to cut standing up. So I need any kind of ruler. It really doesn't matter because all I'm doing is cutting these apart in between the 2 sewing lines that we made. So I'm cutting in between. I'm going to cut this one because This one went a little crooked. You can see that this seam's a lot smaller than what this seam is. Not a big deal, because we're going to square these up. So now that they're already sewn, I don't care really about what size my seam is. We're just going to cut. Tiffany, we have to press these now. So this is not only a mystery for you ladies, it's kind of a mystery for me as well, because I don't have instructions and I don't have pictures of how the blocks are going together until...
I don't have my computer. Oh dear. Let me see.
Okay. So I'm thinking they would press towards the dark.
Give me 1 second to figure out.
What we want to do now is go press our seams. I am just going to move this out of the way, my fabrics, and I'm going to just pull my pressing mat in.
Actually, you're better off pressing towards the light.
Really?
Yeah, because the rest of the block, nesting it together, you're going to want to press the rest of them towards the dark, and you're going to want these ones pressed towards the light.
Okay, so right now we're going to press towards the light. We're going to hold Tiffany to that. I'm just going to charge up my iron here. So we are going to press this time to the light. What she's going to do is once she gets home, she is going to double check that information for us. And if it changes, she will post it right away. But I think we're going to press towards the light.
Well, I have a picture of the block on my phone. So I was looking at the full block.
Okay.
That's why I'm somewhat confident.
Okay. So we didn't think to charge up my iron. Okay, so we're going to start pressing these blocks. This is now a bias. If I start ironing and squishing my fabric and moving my fabric, I can get a really wonky seam here. So what I want to do is we don't iron our fabric anymore, we press. So I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to set my seam. And I am going to open it up carefully with my fingers right up to that stitching line. I like to press with no steam at this point. Steam can if I have a distorted seam, steam will set it in. So I want to make sure that it's open all the way to the seam. I don't want to have any little foldy over parts, and I don't want to be able to stretch it so much that I see the stitches. So I am just going to continue on. I'm going to set my seam, and that sort of sinks that thread into our fabric, and I'm going to press. I love pressing one on top of the other. I stagger them up so the seams are not together whatsoever. So now my bottom pieces are getting pressed 2 or 3 times so they stay nice and flat. So there's our one colors. And again, so I have my light fabric. Tiff said to press our seams towards the light. So my light fabric is on the top. So when I open this up and keep that seam holding down, my seam is going towards the light. Light, light, light. Is there any questions, Tiff, while we're going on?
No one has asked any questions.
Please feel free to ask anything. Sometimes things come up too that you think of, and that's what I love about these lives. Maybe not even for this situation right now. If there is a question, please ask it. Got a couple more here. I might as well press them all while we're here. And one more.
I will answer a question before it comes up. You will be sewing all of those squares that you were told to cut. Cindy just quit halfway through.
Yes. Okay. So now I have my squares, and now I need to trim them up to 2.5. Here's a little tip for you. If we were doing half square triangles, a lot of the patterns will tell you to cut fabric. So this is a 2-inch finish. That means once it's sewn into a block, and you're not including the seam allowances, it will be 2 inches finished. So we have to square them up to 2.5. So that's the 2 inches plus 1/4 and 1/4. Because it's got a diagonal seam, the magic measurement for that is 7/8. So if the pattern said to cut 2 7/8 inch squares, we would have to sew absolutely perfect, and then when we open them up, they would be exactly 2.5 inch squares. Too much to go wrong in my world. That's why we bump the size up to 3 inches. So I'm adding 1/8 of an inch of a fabric. It's really not that much. And now we're going to square them up. So we can have some different tools to be able to square. But you do need a square. I have 3 of my favorites here. And I will save my absolute favorite for half square triangles to the end. You can square up with a larger ruler and it squares down. Or the smaller the square, the easier it is to work. So the first one we're going to work for the half square triangles is this Creative Grids. They even come in a 2.5 inch. So that's really cool because I can just plop it on there, cut all the way around. Tiffany, can I have my rotating mat that's right there, please?
Absolutely.
If you have a rotating mat, they're good. They're not absolutely necessary, but they are, if you have one, they're great to have. Okay, so I'm just going to use this ruler because that's probably the one that most people have. What works better on camera, do you think? The dark, the brown, or the green?
Both.
Both?
They're fine.
Okay, all right. So what I want to do is put my block, rotating it so my diagonal line is going from my upper right to my bottom left. If you're left-handed, you would be doing it in the other direction, but we'll just do it right-handed for today. I have a diagonal line that is on my ruler, and I will place that exactly on the seam. You can see I have a little bit of fabric that I'm going to trim off of there, and I want to make sure that there's a little bit of fabric outside of my 2.5 inch because this can slide up and down that seam. So I want to be able to square all 4 sides. So I've got this lined up perfectly. I'm going to put pressure here. Remember there's a seam there, so it's going to want to shift a little bit at the end. So that's where I want to put pressure. I'm just going to use the big cutter because that's what most people have. So I'm going to cut my right side. Now for the bottom one. Don't start out here and go in this way because you're going to chip off the edge of your ruler. They're really expensive and we want to make sure that they last as long as we can. So what I like to do is I'm going to put it up against my ruler and I'm going to back it up just a little bit and then I'm going to go forward. I'm holding my block. I haven't moved it. I want to make sure that it's all going to be trimmed. So before I move it, I can go back and square it up if I have to. Okay, so now I'm going to lift my ruler. This is the corner that's absolutely perfect. So my upper right, I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. So now it's my lower left. On the block, I want to find the 2.5 inch lines. I can use these ones as well that are marked 2.5. I find they're
not your favorite.
Not my favorite because I'm old school. Our rulers before never had the halves on it. Tiffany likes this side because she's new school and she likes the actual 2.5s. Just remember that this, with our older brains, we've always counted 1, 2, and a half. So if you were using this line and went 1, 2, and a half, you're actually only at 1.5, so you're going to mess up your blocks. So that's my story today.
I just look for the 2.5-inch number.
So I'm going to find the 2.5-inch line, and it should fit absolutely perfect. Again, remember, we like the lines of our rulers on top of our fabric, not beside. Our diagonal is still along the seam. I am going to trim, and now I have an absolutely perfect 2.5-inch square. So number one, first ruler. Again, if you have the little one, they're cool because you don't have to think. You're just going to square up just a little bit harder to hold. Number two, if you don't have that ruler, but you have the Tucker Trimmer ruler, my next favorite. It has this diagonal line, and it has 2 different sides that you can use. So if it has a full moon, they're full numbers. If it has the half moon, it's halves. So we want to use this one that's the 2.5. Easy to see because there's a lot less marks on the ruler. Again, so I want to line up that center diagonal on a seam of my block. I want to make sure that there's fabric, a little bit of fabric all the way around. So I can shift it down so I have a little bit of fabric all the way around. Same thing, I'm going to cut. And I'm going to cut, roll backwards, picking it up, rotating it 180 degrees.
Or using your rotating mat that you asked
Or
for
I
and
could
haven't
use
used.
my rotating mat. Yeah, really, eh? So that was like this, picking it up. I could rotate the whole mat. See, now I'm out of camera range. Now I'm going to find that 2.5-inch line. I am going to line them up on the edge of the block, eyeballing that diagonal, making sure it still stays there. And I'm going to trim and trim. So now I've got two piles started. My favorite ruler of all time for half square triangles is this block log. Let me just push these to the side so I don't drop them on the floor. What I like about this ruler is it has a groove. Probably you couldn't see my head in the picture, or maybe you did, because with these ones, I have to get in there and use my bifocals and make sure that that line is lined up right on my seam allowance. A little bit harder for my eyes. Whereas this one, we have this groove in the bottom that will literally lock onto my seam, which is like absolutely phenomenal. So I know that it's lined up on my seam, and I'm ready to go. If it locks on the seam and your corner is not on top of your seam, just rotate your ruler. We're just using the wrong side for that block.
Now they do have a 2.5-inch version of this one. We just lost ours.
Yeah.
It's missing.
It's small. It's probably in a project somewhere, you know, because we keep things all together. Alrighty, so I've slid it down the block. So my 2.5-inch line is somewhere on my fabric, and I have fabric on the outside. I'm just going to put a little upward pressure on it to make sure that it stays butted up nicely against my seam. I'm going to cut. Now with this one, I am not going to lift my ruler. I am going to rotate the block and the ruler at the same time. I am going to slide the ruler down my seam until my 2.5-inch lines line up with the edge of my block. And then I'm going to trim, and then I'm going to trim.
I am going to check if anyone has asked any questions.
Yep. And I'm going to just trim some more blocks. Again, my next one, butting down, pushing a little bit of downward pressure. I'll try to keep it in the middle of my mat so I don't lose it when I turn it. My 2.5-inch lines are on my fabric. Like I said when we started out, this isn't a very difficult quilt. It's wonderful for beginners, but also for the more experienced quilters. Sometimes it's just so nice to be able to do things that are simple, that I don't have to think. There will be a few other things that we're going to be learning as we go along. Tiffany promised me that. And again, so I'm going to butt it up. My 2.5 inch lines, butt it up, roll it back. I am going to rotate the whole thing, slide it down.
Did you show them how it can rotate the block with just the ruler?
I didn't because I have a rotary mat, but I will do that. Okay. So if you don't have the benefit of having a rotary mat, a rotating mat, you do need a rotary mat. I've got it on my block. I've got my fabric around. I'm going to trim my first 2 sides. I still want to rotate my block and my ruler, so I'm just going to rotate the whole thing, slide it down.
Because it's locked on the seam, it just rotates your block right along with it. I love that ruler for that.
Again, just to, you can see which one that I've squared up so many with that ruler because I love it the best. But let's just go back and we'll square up a couple more just in case this is the only ruler that you have at home. Again, diagonal on the diagonal seam. My fabric is somewhere along outside the 2.5 inch marks. I'm going to cut, rotate back, cut. This time again, lift my ruler 180 degrees into the bottom right hand corner, or bottom left hand corner, finding my 2.5 inch. The one thing about this creative grid ruler that I do have is these little marks right in the center, and I call them chicken feet. So you can see this one right here is into the intersection of the 2.5. So their chicken feet is bigger on the half, and these are quarters, eighths. This one's a quarter and that's an eighth. So I'm just lining up that little chicken foot on the corner of my block. My lines are up, all good. Cut, cut. Do we have to label these in any way, Tiffany? Did you have units that we are cutting that we have labels?
We do not at this point. They're the only half square triangles in the quilt. So
okay,
right now we're okay.
Okay, so we'll continue on.
Next week's instructions may come with labels.
Perfect. So again, just to recap, we are going to cut blocks of our D, E, F, and G fabrics.
Or let's call it Unit 1.
We will call these Unit 1. So there's G and F. There is my D and my E. We will sew them together and we will make half square triangles. So, because we had 12 blocks in total, we get 2 per square. So we need to make, for the lap size people, we may need to make 24 of each colorway. For a double, you need 40. So that's 20 squares. And then the queen size, you had to cut 36 squares. You would have needed 3 strips for that, and you will have 72 of each colorway. So no more difficult to make a big quilt than a little quilt, just more sewing. So I think that's all that we had to go on today. Oh, I wanted to show you one other thing. I have quick clips, and I have my plastic storage box. This is where all my stuff is going to go. I can either, if I only have a few units like this, I can take my clip and I will clip these all together with my Unit 1, and I will make sure that I keep them in my storage box so things are nice and safe. Again, I love these boxes. You get them at Michael's for scrapbooking. It just keeps everything nice and combined. I know where everything is. I don't want to take my scraps and use them for a different project because the color was pretty and it worked well with that other quilt until this one is finished.
Any questions, anyone, before we leave?
I guess that's it then. So, like I said, it's really simple block, but it's getting us going, right? We had to cut our fabric. We had to do all this, got our blocks. Easy peasy.
If you don't have any questions, can you give us a little heart in the chat so we know everyone's good?
Yep. Also, some of you may not be sewing. You're just watching right now. As you're sewing, if a question comes up, don't hesitate to comment in on our Facebook group. Like I said, we're going to be checking that out constantly, or sending us a message, or you know what? Give us a call. We're always here Tuesdays to Fridays from 10 till 5. So give us a call if you have a question. We're here to help. We just love this quilting journey. We want everybody to be successful.
Oh, we got a heart and a thank you. We got a few hearts.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. Alrighty. So since you don't need me anymore, I'm going to let you go. I am just going to continue on now sewing these blocks together. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to, we have a new website available that we're just starting on. We won't have fabric available there, but we do have kits and things to sell that are on there so far. Check them out. We will have, as soon as we have that section ready to go, we will have the instructions for the mystery quilts on that page as well, or on our YouTube channel as well. So I am going to sit down and I am going to keep sewing and sew the rest of my blocks. I don't want to get behind. And happy quilting, everybody. We'll see you next Monday.
Ooh, from Belgium.